All right, welcome everybody. This is the second quarter webinar for the Financial Foundations, and this is going to be one where we're going to talk about budgets. I kind of joked with our church treasurers here in the Dakotas. In our last statements, I put out 2020 will end. We will need to do a budget again. Seriously. So anyway, I'm glad you're with us, and I'm here with Sheri Meister from the Dakota's United Methodist Foundation as well as the Minnesota United Methodist Foundation. Hey, Sheri.
Hi, Jeff. Hello, everyone. Welcome.
And I'm Jeff Pospisil with the Dakota's Annual Conference, and I also do the bookkeeping for both foundations. So I don't know if that's an official thing.
Well, sure it is. We're glad to have you on both teams.
Yeah. So a couple of housekeeping items. This is Blue Jeans Event is the software we're using. We are going to try to be able to ask questions, communicate with us. There's a chat box, which is in the upper right. And you might not be able to see it if you are not fully, if you're maximized, I guess. If it's full screen, you might not be able to see it. And the other thing we're going to try to do is do a couple of polls, and we'll see if that's, some of it's just keep people engaged and learn a little bit about each other as we're going through this. With that, I'm going to start our first slide. So like I said, this is the 3 principles that will transform your church budget. Sheri and I, we visited with a lot of churches. I've been a church treasurer for quite a long time. 2003 is the first year I was a church treasurer, so quite a bit of time. And served on a lot of finance committees. And there's a number of things that we see that frustrate and defeat a church budget and make it feel like it's not even worth doing. I even had a church treasurer make that comment, that it's just, if I didn't have to get this approved at charge conference, I would not do this. So, which is odd, because normally church treasurers like numbers and like doing this thing. Like I said, this is a picture of Sheri and I, so just to double up on that, that's how you spell our names. So, I didn't know if we were going to do a poll first.
Sure. I think we're going to practice a poll, Jeff.
All right. Our first poll question is, on the right-hand side, who best resembles your church, how your church manages money? Ebenezer Scrooge, the federal government, Mr. Magoo, or Warren Buffett? I didn't even know if people knew who Mr. Magoo is. So he's the blindish guy that always gets into trouble from 80s, I think. And we'll go ahead and wait a couple seconds. And as the results are coming in, we're seeing Warren Buffett, which is a good deal. A couple of Mr. Magoos. Nobody's the federal government. So, oh wait, now there are a couple. Very interesting results. So anyway, it seems like some of you are savvy investors like Warren Buffett. Others are just trying to pinch every penny. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go to our first principle. Principle number 1 is know your bottom line. Know your bottom line. I've worked with a lot of churches, and normally this is how they set their bottom line, is they kind of estimate how much their expenses need to go up or down, and then they look at that bottom line. And especially if you're crossing one of those large landmarks like 100,000 or 250,000 or whatever that big number is, there's the cringe factor. And we look at each other and we kind of say, do you think they'll accept this? Do you think they'll accept a $200,000 budget? And it's the cringe factor is our bottom line. We really don't have a bottom line. We just kind of go by our gut. And in no other place would this work. An example of this is I took our kids out to a fancy meal, and my wife was buying, so we went all out. We went to Dairy Queen. And normally when we go there, my wife, she manages this part of our budget, and she says, order what you want. And the kids order a meal deal almost always, and they get a drink and they get a fries with it, and they almost never eat all the fries and the drink, and we spend more than we wanted to. And so the only ones that are happy are the kids. Mom's not happy because we blew our budget and she's going to have to cut in other places. I'm not happy because we're wasting food. And the kids are happy because they got everything they wanted. Well, this last time we went to Dairy Queen, I asked my wife while we were in line, I said, how much do you want to spend here? What's your bottom line? And she said $30. So I told each kid, I have 3 kids, and then there's 2 of us. So I told them, you each have $6 to spend. And at first they kind of balked. At first they kind of thought, this is, I'm not going to be able to get my meal deal that I normally get, because most of the meal deals are over $6, and especially when you add the tax. And so, but then all of a sudden, their whole world changed as they thought, I can get a sandwich and a Blizzard or an ice cream cone. And it was just interesting to see all of a sudden their whole world changed when all of a sudden they had freedom within that boundary. They knew what their bottom line was, $6, but anything within that I could do. And it was just interesting because then everyone was happy. There was less wasted food. Kids got exactly what they wanted, actually better than what they normally wanted. And then my wife, her budget wasn't busted. So, and it's not just at Dairy Queen. Sheri?
This next one is a picture of building a house and buying a car and go to the grocery store. And a few years ago, my husband Randy and I built a new house. And, we had it budgeted and we had it set out into different places. And we knew that with all of the options out there that we could really blow that budget. But we found that staying within that and really paying attention to that we were able to build the house that we, really the house of our dreams, and still stay within our budget and to stay with things that we liked. It just took a little bit longer. It took some effort to be able to do that. And maybe if we went over in one area, we knew we were going to have less of those the fun stuff maybe in another area, or we had to really shrink some of the other areas. But it was really it was a really great experience to be able to do that and to watch that, because it happens in a relatively quick amount of time. So you get to see how the budget adjusts as you're doing that when you're building a house. And it's the same thing when you're buying a car. Many people would like those extra amenities in the car, but staying within that budget is so important. The same at the grocery store. There are some things, if you're going to be adamant on some things in your budget, you just have to realize that you're not going to be able to have those same amenities and those same extras in some of the other areas of your budget.
Yeah, for most of us, overspending, especially if it leads into debt, ruins it for a finance person. Overspending your income ruins it for a finance person.
Right.
One of the things I did, and this is we have this available online. I created a real simple spreadsheet, a bottom line calculator, because I believe using your historical regular operating income is probably your best start on how to set your bottom line. I looked at so many churches where they basically say, well, you got to have faith. Well, their faith never bridges that gap. They might budget always $120,000, but they never bring in over $100,000. And why is your faith any different for 2021 than it was in 2019 and 2018 and 2017? So maybe that's blasphemous, but I'll take it. So um, anyway, so I'm just going to walk you real quickly on what this spreadsheet does, and it'll be available, and we'll send out the link to it out there. But it should give you a good estimate for what your 2021 is. So you plug in your very first year, which is 2020, or your current year, 2020. And then the next thing you have to do is plug in how you finished the year end for the 3 previous years. So where did you finish? And I plugged in fake numbers because that's what I do, I guess. I plugged in fake numbers. And then the hard part is because you also want to factor in 2020. I hate to leave that on the table, and say, oh, you can't just discount it, because 2020 is probably going to be a significantly different year. Normally, it's not going to be as different, but you want to know if I'm trending up or things are changing this year. I want to know. So then I would look at where are you year to date for all 4 of those years. So let's just say it's, the end of August, and you plug in your numbers, and it's 75,000 for 2017 and 72.5 for 2018 and 70 for 2019, and this year we're at 67,500. It's never always like this, but this regular. But then the formulas in there just give you an average change. So it's looking for the average change, and it just calculates that for you automatically. So you'd even notice by the trend that maybe this is even a little on the high side, but it's still much better than what most people would do. Most churches, if I saw these numbers, if I saw these income numbers, chances are they budgeted at $120,000 probably almost every year. I mean, that's the way churches basically are. We budget what we think we need and push that pain down the road, and then it's up to the finance committee and it's up to other ones to make cuts and to make reductions and not spend money, or we borrow from our reserves, our savings, so our CDs. And so it's better to set that instead of at that level, that $120,000 level, to maybe set it at $94,000. This spreadsheet works whether your church is growing in income or shrinking in income or staying the same. So, all right, and we will be sending that out to you following this, probably tomorrow. Principle number 2, include your long-term goals. Include your long-term goals. And I think we do have a poll for this. I think I actually skipped over a poll before. All right. Okay, this is a poll for the budget one. Is your budget realistic? And we'll let you chime in on that. Is your budget realistic? Yes, we usually budget pretty close to what we actually spend, kind of, but we're really hoping we budget based on if we have a really, really good year, or our budget lives in the same reality as unicorns, or what budget? So I'll let people respond to that. All right, and we have a lot of responses for, pretty good budgeters. That's you guys are awesome.
Right, Jeff. I'm encouraged by
I
what
know.
we're seeing there. Yeah.
Some of them are basing it on the good year, which is cool, and we probably have one person that's like, "What budget?" So, which is totally
Exactly.
appreciate your honesty. So, all right. Now I'm going to go to principle number 2. And with principle number 2, include your long-term goals. I remember when I very first became the annual conference treasurer, I got a phone call from a church, and this is the actual picture of the church I got called on. So if you're watching, don't take offense. But it was just one of those eye-opening moments. The church called me up, and I said, well, what are your plans for raising giving, And they said this, we're just trying to keep the doors open. And I'd never heard this before. I was brand new, and it slipped out of my mouth. Wouldn't it be cheaper to get a doorstop? Yeah. And I don't think that was received well, but they didn't call back. But it was just so offensive to me that the church's vision for the future was just to keep the doors open. I know sometimes you feel like that. I know sometimes that we feel overwhelmed by the stress of trying to run the budget for that. But for me, I always wanted something bigger and better for my church's vision for the future. So the challenge we have is, what do you have in your budget that looks beyond 1 year? I'll let Sheri go ahead.
Jeff, this is where we start to talk about, cut deficit spending. What are you spending on that takes you into the hole, takes you under or over budget, and that you could really do without, or that you could put off maybe for another year, or something that you could do a special offering for rather than keeping it in your budget. Retire your debt. And Jeff and I see a number of churches that have debt that has been accrued over a number of years, and it's just sitting out there sort of nagging at the church, and you get used to it. You get used to having that out there, and so it's one of the things that you do, and you put it into your budget, and you kind of go through the motions of getting rid of that. But it's really important to start putting the focus on that to retire the debt, and then grow your reserves. And it's so important to have some reserves, to have a backup, to have a place that you can turn to for a rainy day. During a pandemic, there are times that growing the reserves, and you will many times get pushback on this in your churches, because there's some people in the beliefs that you shouldn't have money just sitting in a pot or an account that is just sitting there, that it should be used, and you should be, doing maintenance and upkeep on your churches, and that you should be putting it into ministry. But it's so very important to grow those reserves, keep the vitality of your church. And then save for your big purchase. We always reference the boiler going out, or needing a new roof, or if there's something you really need for the church and something new for your ministries, you want to have a fund that you are saving for that big purchase, so that you don't have to cut into all the other budget areas to be able to purchase that.
Yeah, Sheri, I don't know if you mind if I chime in here, but we're
jump in.
saving for our college, for our kids, and we started saving when they were super young, and just a minimal amount every year, really. But just how I would rather have the bank pay me than me pay interest to the bank. So, and it's just amazing how that adds up, especially over something like a boiler or a roof, which might be, every 20 plus years. So.
Correct. And then this is becoming more and more important for churches, and it becomes one of the most difficult things for finance committees and administrators to look at in their budgeting. And that's phasing in a staff person or a program. And many times those will be phased in by a grant program. You'll get a grant, you want to try a program, and then that program is successful, but you haven't figured out how to phase that into your budgeting. And to believe it or not, phasing out the staff position and phasing in the staff position are almost equally as painful for many finance budgets, because everybody wants things to stay the status quo. You want things to be able to, or to be consistent. You want things to look the same. You want church to look the same. So phasing in and out staff positions becomes a bit painful. And the other thing is that one of the reasons the staff positions is so painful is because you see the person in that position and you don't always recognize it as the position itself and the need for the program of your church, or no longer the need for the program of your church, but you see the person. It's really hard to make those decisions when there's an actual person behind it.
For me, I got asked once, practically, how do you do that? How do you budget for savings? And it starts with, of course, your bottom line, your realistic bottom line. If I can set up my budget based on that bottom line, that's it, based in reality, all you have to do is actually put another line item in there. That was a stretch for some churches, to actually put it in there. If you're fairly confident about your income, then you can actually treat it as a regular transfer. Then you can transfer it to your investments if that's the case. For some of these other things, like what Sheri was talking about, how important it is to have a plan for phasing in and phasing out, and a lot of times those might be happening at the same time, or sometimes instead of doing, I used to try to tell people you should do a multi-year budget. That never really catches on. What I started doing and leaning more on is I'm just going to put a note in the budget. I mean, so if my plan was to grow Christian Ed by double it over the next couple of years, I would just put an asterisk there or some kind of a footnote there that says our plan is to do this, or we're planning on saving $2,000 per year for a new boiler that we expect in the next 20 years. Whatever it happens to be. But that almost is more effective to me than doing a multi-year budget, because then you put that little bit of narrative in there and remind people what your plan is and the amount. All right, Kelsey, I think we have another poll. And our poll is, how long do you think your church will be around? Hopefully until the end of the year. Normally, not during a pandemic. That wouldn't be a concern for most. Maybe 1 to 5 years, 10 to 20 years until the Trump sounds. And that is a reference to the Revelation and not the election. So anyway, how long do you think? Because your budget should reflect that there is some kind of something that you're working towards, some kind of plans besides the current year, is why we want people to think about that. And we're getting the results in, and most people until the end. There's a few of us that are very concerned, and and that's all right. I mean, that's good to look at that now and start addressing those issues now. And many of them think, 10 to 20 years. I know there's a number of us with aging congregations that's a concern for us. Very interesting. All right. Our last principle is tell your story in numbers and words. Principle number 3.
Okay, Jeff, as you and many people that work directly with me know, this is what resonates dear and near to my heart. Telling your story. Tell the story of your church and how it's impacting those that are worshiping with you and those that are in your community. And the best way to do that is to find the ministries and how they've impacted those that are within your congregation, but are there other people within your community or your towns that you're also impacting? Are there groups? Are there groups of kids? Are there and group of the aging? Or is there a food bank? Is there a place that you are making an impact? The The thing that I always say, and that Jeff knows, because Jeff loves numbers and he loves the bottom line and he loves graphs. I don't know if I ever have in the time we worked together, Jeff, found somebody that's given to the bottom line. But when we started to tell the story about how those numbers have impacted people and how the ministry is helping you as a church make disciples and tell the story of Jesus and their faith journey, then people can resonate with that, and then the dollars will start to come in.
Yeah, I've met one person in all my time that has given because of the line item budget. They determine their giving on that. No, and I've known a lot of people. I agree. You don't go to a donor and normally and say, "Here's your line item budget." That has to be there, but that's not the main motivator for their giving.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Okay, I
last,
love this slide.
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, if you can tell a story in your budget and the kids in your children's word wants to have the pastor read it again, then you have made a difference in your congregation. And that one way to do that is by a narrative budget. And to be able to do a narrative budget, I don't know, Jeff, you're going to flip there. Yeah. To be able to do a narrative budget, it's telling your story through words, and it's not publishing the line item budget. It's telling the narrative budget. And so you have graphs and you have graphics and you have the stories. How does it impact it? How many kids are involved? How many Bible studies have you had? How many new people have attended your Bible studies? How many new people are attending? And it takes away from the pressure of all just the numbers and increasing those, but how are your ministries then impacting? And then you talk about how much it costs to be able to do each one of those ministry areas.
Because for
Go ahead,
me,
Jeff.
when I started giving the annual conference budget, I only share like a handful of numbers, but it occurred to me that of the whatever 500 or so people that were in the room, roughly 90% of them don't understand numbers or they don't speak to them. There's that 10% that numbers, they can easily digest numbers, they mean a lot to them, but that 90%, when you present that budget, it really doesn't mean a lot unless it's in almost a narrative format. Does that sound right to you from the people you visited with?
That's exactly. And we've picked out a narrative budget right here that speaks well to what the ministries are. And you can Google narrative budgets and you can find resources out there. Be very careful on which ones you choose, because there's lots of things out there that probably aren't the best tools, but that's where we come in and we can help you. We love to help churches in these areas and defining their missions and their goals. You've got to have your budget set up to the missions and the goals of your church. And this is a great way to do that in the one that Jeff is showing here, because that it also ties to the giving and the donor card.
I don't want to gloss over that, what you said, because honestly, to do a narrative budget, your church needs a story. So if you are struggling to identify your story, Sheri has helped a number of churches do that, and that's just a great service to the foundations to help you find your story, to help you find out what makes you tick. Why does your church, what's your purpose for your church or your vision for your church?
When we set up our vision for the foundation in the Dakotas, and we're working on that as well in Minnesota, we've been working in the Minnesota area for just a year now, and that's one thing that we'll work towards, is getting the vision and the mission in a place and in a direction that is beneficial for the foundation, and it also aligns with the programs of the conference. And when we did that, we wanted to have a focus in the Dakotas on developing relationships, which we're hoping all churches are doing, developing the relationships in their churches as well. And then cultivating resources, find where the resources are, and match those ministries to the resources, and then embracing ministry, so that we're embracing the ministry and the focus of the strengths of the ministries within the conference.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a quick example. I also did a video on this, which we'll also send out later, which will kind of walk it through for a church. But what I want to use is I want to use Mitchell Christian School. That's a school that I've served on the finance committee for. And some years ago, it's probably been longer than I think, but maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, we developed this quick, easy motto or saying, for our vision: educating students, pairing disciples, impacting God's world. Educating, discipling, and impacting was basically what we knew we were about as Mitchell Christian School. And as a finance person sitting on the finance committee, I thought, well, we need to actually take this seriously. So how do we actually apply this? And for me, it started off for me as a finance person. So I'm speaking to the finance people first. Is I looked at how our budget was set up, and it was set up like this: academics, administrative, athletics, student activities, board. It was like any church, any school around. You could not tell our school, you could not tell our mission by our chart of accounts, by how our reports were. And I knew that was a problem, because if you can't see it in your chart of accounts and in your reports, chances are you're not living it out. So what I did is I helped us change it, and what I did is I broke some stuff up and I rearranged some stuff, but I made sure that we had a spot for educating, which was already in there for academic, but I changed it from academic to educating. I included discipling, which was lumped in there somewhere. And then also, this was one that we had neglected, we didn't do well at, was development as a school. That needed to be more important, and we needed to put more money there. So I made all these things very visible so that we couldn't ignore it anymore. So that was kind of on the backstage types of things we did to help us as leadership focus more on it, on our mission. And then the next thing we did is this is a fake budget. So these are fake numbers, but we looked at our budget, and then we decided we would go through line by line to figure out how much was for educating, how much was for discipling, how much was for impacting. So of our staff time, of our educating, of our discipling, of all of our office and administration, what percentage of each one of those actually went towards parts of our mission, which is a good exercise in itself, because if something's not supporting what our mission and our vision is, why is it in the budget? And some of it's kind of indirect, but still, your building should be supporting your mission and vision. Your staffing should. And so went through the exercise, filled in the percentages, and then from that, it's actually, if you're doing this in Excel, I just found a way to do this quick and simple, is you just use the sum product formula. And so any of you guys that are Excel nerds, you can see that I'm taking column B and timesing it by column C in there. And so it multiplies each row in column B by each row in column C and gives you the right number. So a lot easier than doing any other formulas. So, and then you would do the same thing except for B and D, and then B and E. So for you Excel nerds, that's a bonus for you guys. And then after you get those bottom line numbers, it's super easy to do a pie chart. And so that's what we would do, is normally do some kind of a chart to show the breakdown that 71% of every dollar goes towards educating. But we wouldn't necessarily focus on that. We would focus on the stories. And here's a picture from the paper of us winning the local quiz bowl, for the 20-something straight year. So, I mean, we could do some story about how are we excelling in education. And then for discipling, we're spending 20-some% on discipling or whatever that percentage was, but here's what it looks like. We have kids that are trained worship leaders now, and they do a weekly worship service. And then that 8% for impacting, this one, it's a good story too. We received an award a couple years in a row for our outstanding volunteer work to our retirement and nursing home facilities. So again, these pictures tell a lot. The stories tell a lot. The percentages tell a lot, and they tell a whole lot more than a line item budget will to most people. Most people, if they just saw this in just straight numbers, here's how much we're spending on salaries, here's how much we're spending on the heating and copies and staples, they would get distracted and they would lose the big picture of we're about educating, discipling, and impacting.
Jeff, I think that's exactly right. And I think that many times that's where people get caught up in the budgets, and people who are making the budgets are overseeing and governing the budgets. When they can look at the focus and the vision like this and see their mission and their vision in their numbers, then they leave it to the staff to decide how many paper clips and how many reams of paper they need in their copier contracts and those type of things. This is for big picture. This is for accountability within these areas. And then the details for the staff to live within those becomes the responsibility of the administration within the church.
And just even as an exercise, this totally changes the way you look at your budget. I mean, when you are a leader trying to go through this exercise of figuring out what am I actually doing for impacting, or whatever it is, whatever your church mission is, what am I actually doing that is furthering us towards that vision for our church?
Correct.
Very clarifying. All right.
Well, and it gives you opportunities. It gives you opportunities of ministry, and it gives you opportunities of discipling within your church when you can focus on the big picture, your mission and your vision, and takes away from the the habit, I guess is the word I'm looking for, of going into the tangibles. It's easy to get stuck in the tangibles because you can see that, but to be able to have that vision of the opportunities it's really freeing within your budget so that you can do the ministry of the church.
Well, I guess we'd like to thank you for participating in this webinar, and we will be doing a recording. The recording, we'll try to make it available hopefully tomorrow, as well as those follow-up materials that to help you. And I'm just hoping that this was helpful, and that this will help you have a better budget than normal this year, that you'll take another step forward, because we love our churches, and we love seeing them do better, and just being more successful in what they're doing.
Correct. And if there's anything we can do to help you, do not hesitate to call us. And Barb Brower from the Minnesota office is just as willing to help. And any of us that can help you as a church, that's what we're here for, is to help with the connection. So do not hesitate. This is the stuff that energizes Jeff and I, and we're here for you. So please reach out if we can be an assistance to help with the vision and the mission of your church and the focus of your budget.
All right. Until next time, we will be planning in middle of November. So.
Right. We hope you can join us then. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.